you can do this one again. All right. So my name is, thank you all for sharing and introducing yourself. My name is Dr. NWK, and this is awkward because I have slides, and they want me to be positioned here. So
You can move right.
no, I can do the slides. Yeah, it's fine. The camera will be alright. We'll be alright. So I'll just position myself here. So today, I'll just share a little bit about myself. What we're talking about today, I'm gonna share a little bit about myself, my story. We'll talk about the importance of STEM. It's this workshop focused on inequities in STEM. And I'm gonna try to offer some plausible solutions. I'll talk a little bit about my work and about my research and the work that I do in schools. And we'll have some conversation about the state of STEM for communities of color and how youth culture can support STEM achievement and success. All right, so a little bit about me. My name is Dr. NWK. I'm a professor at Seton Hall University in the Ed Studies Department. I'm the program director of the Ed Studies Department as well, actually secondary education in particular. I'm a faculty fellow at the Institute of Urban and Minority Education at Teachers College University. I'm an ed consultant, I'm a product of New York City Public Schools, and I'm a former middle school science educator. That's me in a nutshell. And I come to this work with a bevy of experiences, both in research and also personal experiences. And I think in my work, a lot of my personal experiences, whether positive and both negative, have influenced me to be who I am and where I am, and have also influenced the type of work that I do within schools and within the system of education. So I like to start a lot of workshops and presentations with a quote. And the quote that I chose for today is, "Creativity is the secret sauce to science, technology, engineering, and math. It is a STEM virtue." And this is by Anissa Ramirez, who is a PhD, an award-winning scientist, and she is a Black woman. So, just real briefly, there's going to be maybe about a few opportunities for us to talk and just have some conversations, because I want to hear from you as well. So I have 2 prompts up here that you can choose either one to answer. But I'm curious about your experiences in STEM, your positive experience in STEM. So the first question is, when was the first time you felt successful doing science? The second you can choose to answer is if you could describe any positive science experience. You can go, anyone can start. You all don't have to respond. I'm just curious.
I'll go.
Yeah.
My first experience was probably 8. And I don't see that today. So maybe it's something with the environment, or. But we had we could get frogs that we could dissect, and so me and my cousins were taking animals that we gotten from my height, and we're exploring.
Okay.
And I took that interest.
Okay, so it was kind of an exploratory experience. Okay, anybody else care to share?
Well, I grew up in the 50s, and in the 50s there was a magazine which was called Popular Science.
Okay.
And I used to look at that, and I used to perform the experiments that were suggested in the magazine. And so I made a crystal radio, and I can't tell you right now how it worked, but my point is, I followed the instructions, and it had these alligator clips. I went to Radio Shack, because that was where we got all our, electronic gizmos from. And it had capacitors in it, resistors, and they showed me the diagram of how to put it together. And they gave me alligator clips to clip on to the springs under my bed. And the radio picked up AM stations. But now I got to go to Duracell, I got to go to Everready to get a battery. And I'm saying, wait a minute, there's alternative energy sources. I think I was about 10 years old, and the main reason I made that radio was to find out whether schools were closed because it snowed. And I put together that radio quickly so I could tell my mother, school closed.
School's closed. I know before you. That's amazing. So another kind of experience that you gave me something. Yes.
Yeah, I don't remember what grade. I think it might have been around 5th. And we were
experiences?
I never would describe myself as a science or math person, but I took a calculus class in college. I went to NYU because I was in philosophy and English, and I had this great teacher, and he's the only teacher who ever made me feel that I could learn math. He was very expressive. I think he was from Brazil, and then he could explain math to someone like just visually. It was just, he was the best, one of the best teachers I ever had all around.
That's amazing. So I'm hearing hands-on experiences and positive experiences with educators, right? That are experience around science and math, right? Okay, that's good to know for context. So a little bit about me. I like to start off with sharing my story because I believe my story is very unique and it's what propelled me to be here. Like I wouldn't have a PhD if I couldn't study or explore science and hip hop, which is what my dissertation was focused on. And I'll share a little bit about how I got here. Within the context of understanding the realities of education and STEM education is that students of color interest in STEM is decreasing based on statistics, and based on the research that's out there, there's an anticipation that this experience and interest in STEM will continue to decrease as it relates to students of color. All right. So a little bit about me. I am the child and the product of two Ghanaian immigrants. Both my parents are from Ghana, West Africa, migrated to New York City, the Bronx, for a better family for their children or their future children. And this is an image of my neighborhood where I grew up. I went to K to 6. I did K to 6. That was my apartment building on the left. My school is literally up the block, across the street to the right. I did kindergarten to 6th grade here. I remember as a child, I always had I was always interested in science. I never had amazing experiences in school when it came to science because I didn't have the opportunity to. I didn't have hands-on experiences when it came to science, nor did I have an educator who taught us science that in a captivating way. But I was able to go to school with my friends in my neighborhood, in my community. I was able to kind of have fun and try to make sense of teaching and learning until I got to the 6th grade, and I was kind of one of the students who were picked to go to a school for gifted and talented students. And fortunately or unfortunately, this school was outside of my neighborhood. So I went to school in the Thornton Neck area of the Bronx, which is a predominantly Italian neighborhood in the Bronx. So the demographic of my school, the racial demographic of my school shifted. That was new for me. And that school was really focused on testing. So the way that they taught students, kind of drill-based kind of assessments, and the way that they engaged us in the classrooms wasn't in a way to kind of support our minds, our creativity, to allow us to explore. So that's when I found myself starting to get disengaged in school in general. When I got to high school, I met a black male educator, similar to you in your math experience, who drew connections between hip hop and science for me. And I was a young man from the Bronx who loved hip hop and loved youth culture and loved music. And science started to come alive for me again. I went to undergraduate school. I got my undergraduate degree at SUNY Plattsburgh and majored in biochemistry with intentions of becoming a pharmacist. But while I was navigating undergrad, I realized that I wanted to go back to my community. I went back to my high school because I thought it was important for me to kind of support other young students or young people from my community to have similar positive experience when it came to science and STEM. And it's what propelled me to become an educator. So I left my pharmacy track. I went to school. I went to TC to get my license in teaching, and I became a middle school educator in the same community where I grew up in. So that was really important for me because I was very intentional about wanting similar students, similar to me from my community, black and brown students, to have positive experiences when it came to science and when it came to STEM. So here we are. In my work, in a lot of my work, it's really been around how can we support young students in developing positive science identities? How can we support schools in creating equitable opportunities for students to have hands-on experiences and opportunities to engage in STEM? So I'm going to share a lot of statistics today because I want to lay and provide context to what's going on in the field of STEM as it relates to K-12 teaching and learning, higher ed, and also in the workplace. So there's a statistic on the screen here, and the stat reads: according to 2019 educational research study of undergraduates, 40% of black students switch out of STEM majors compared to 29% of white students. So my question to you all is, what realities may be responsible for contributing to this statistic that you may be aware of, that you might want to consider? Why do you think 40% of black students switch out of STEM majors compared to 29% of white students?
So I started off undergrad on a STEM track, and I was pre-med, I was being a doctor. That shifted my junior year. I think it was for the better overall, but I can say that through that experience, you know, one of the things that I found in undergraduate science courses in particular, and math as well, was particularly in the large school that I was in, one, the classes were set up as like leader classes, like to sort of lead out students, so it wasn't a supportive requirement about learning, it was actually meant to sort of, for us to drop off, and that was very clear to us. And what became really clear about how it was like racialized and class-based is that the high schools that we went to and the type of science courses that we had previously, and how many APs we had, like really shaped who stayed or not.
Right.
Because those classes started off with the assumption of a certain level of mastery. And even in terms of the resources available to support us, you know, that infrastructure wasn't necessarily there. So even trying to engage the professor of like, hey, I'm not quite understanding in a class of 300 students, it was very clear that they weren't so concerned about that. So that was my experience that I think maybe adds a little bit of a lived perspective on this stat.
Absolutely. Research supports that. Yeah.
So I appreciate that. So you're talking about preparation.
Yeah.
So preparation is one of the major ones. For me, my experience was that most of my teachers were from a different country. They spoke a very hard English.
Yeah.
And I remember, I agree with you that we actually had physics, and I had a professor from Oxford, and he said, look around you for both sides because they're not going to be here. So to your point, we're talking about how we design the curriculum, and the curriculum was designed to weed out. So the first year, it's designed that way, which maybe it shouldn't be, especially in the light of we desperately needing folks in STEM. That kind of type of weeding out system is probably inappropriate.
Yeah.
So, but mine was, I actually had to record these guys, to take the notes, and then it took me 3 hours to kind of decode what they said, because I kept on having to redo it because their accents were so tough.
Yeah. So you found a way to persist throughout that.
But because you had to.
Right, exactly, right? Yeah, and that's the reality, that's the context for many, right? And unfortunately not for many as well, right?
Can I just add one quick thing? I also think, to give a little more context and build on what you're saying, like I found that at the undergraduate level, the way that the sciences were taught, at least in my experience, was very much abstract and not applied. And what I found to be challenging was my background previous, when I was in high school, I did a lot of programs here at UFD, other things where we would do experiential learning.
Yeah.
And what I found again in those large, like, you know, several hundred student lectures is that, you know, even though we're doing organic chemistry or physics at a certain level, there should be a sense of application of how, you know, doing experiential things that support, like a pedagogy that is about really, and it was more sort of problem set, you know, very kind of just abstracted knowledge.
Understand the concepts and no application of those concepts.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. My experience as well. So,
Well, I taught in the high school for 15 years, urban high school for 15 years. And as this young lady over here said, one of her, you know, motivating factors was her calculus teacher. But the high school I worked at didn't have a calculus class. And I was there 15 years.
yeah.
And I'm sitting eating lunch with other co-workers, and not just for STEM and engineering, things like that, but I got a science teacher here that's telling me, I ain't passing out no scalpels in my class. They're not cutting no flat words, no fingers. I can't trust it with no scalpel. And then on this side, the physics and the chemistry teacher is saying, I ain't turning on the Bunsen burners. I don't want no accidents. And that was 15 years. So I left that school and went to a suburban district. They were teaching STEM and science stuff in junior. They had microscopes in the junior high school. They had in the high school. I went from no lab to 3 computer labs. And I went from kids playing Atari games in the so-called labs in the urban school, and I went there and I had to teach them Fortran, COBOL. I had to teach them Pascal. I had to teach them the languages of that current time. And even when I was trying to catch up, and somebody asked, and I had digital, and I had to do Boolean algebra, never heard of it. And there's no one in my neighborhood that I could run to and say, you know, can you help me with this Boolean algebra? And when there's forming groups in the class, study groups in the class, ain't no sense in picking him because he can't contribute anything to the group. So it's the foundation. I'm getting back the foundation. If we don't pick up the kids in the 7th, 8th, and 9th grade and then bring them on and tell them how to do digital math and tell them how to do this and tell them what hexadecimals are and tell them how to look through the surveying instruments and have them working with protractors and things like that. Because when I taught in Newark, 6th grade, I had to go see my vice principal to get a box of protractors. And then if another teacher had borrowed them before me, I had to change what I was going to teach that day.
You didn't have access to resources.
So STEM, I can see why STEM, the medical profession, a lot of other professions, we don't have those foundational things that would even get students interested in that field.
Absolutely, and that's one of the biggest challenges that we see, particularly in our communities, right? In Black and Brown communities, we see that young people, our students, they don't even see themselves as scientists or as mathematics or mathematicians or engineers, etc., because of access and opportunity, right? Not because of brilliance, resilience, or skill set. Like they just don't have access to opportunity to see what the careers can provide and offer them, right? So your anecdotal experiences share a lot of what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to share a lot of stats that are going to be on the screen, so pardon me for reading a little bit. But I just want to draw attention to, like, you know, we're currently in a pandemic, or, you know, navigating life with COVID-19, and, you know, there's that immediate shift to, like, you know, virtual learning, online learning, and, you know, more of a deeper and more understanding of, like, climate change and social injustices. STEM skills and tech skills are more important now than ever, right? And the research shows that currently there are 22.4 million vacant STEM jobs compared to 1.2 million about 10 years ago, right? And what happens when there are vacant STEM jobs is, and you know, and these companies and corporations are looking for people of color to fill them, or universities are, you know, having diversity searches, etc. Oftentimes they get people from different countries, right? They might get folks from Africa, India, etc., to come and fill those roles in these jobs. And while that may be great for some, you know, for me it's also about how we're supporting and uplifting our own communities and our own young people to be able to fulfill these jobs, right? Just when we talk about the importance of STEM in the workforce, right? STEM occupations is projected to grow by 8.8% by 2028. Like, the STEM occupations are growing. STEM jobs pay well, we know that, right? That's obvious. $19 compared to $38. $19 for the average non-STEM job, close to $40 for the average STEM median wage. And scientific and technological innovations have become extremely important to globalization, right? If we're going to solve the crises and the challenges that we have in our Earth, climate change, pollution, you know, we're looking for technological advances to support us in finding solutions for this, right? And how are we supporting our young people to be able to have the skill, the knowledge, the competence, and the confidence to be able to meet these demands that our country has, right? When we talk about, you know, for me, I'm an advocate for STEM for all, right? Like obviously, you know, I've gone places, I've given talks, I've been in schools, and like, you know, we want all of our students to become scientists, right? And we want them all to go out and embark on these STEM careers, which I think is great. I would love for all of my students to become scientists, but that's not the reality, right? And as equally as important it is to support young people in having opportunities to pursue careers in STEM, it's also important for us to recognize that when we're teaching STEM truly through an interdisciplinary mindset and framework, that it provides these skills that are here that support all students, right? It supports learning for everyone, right? It's not only for, you know, we're not talking about teaching STEM for solely for students to become scientists and engineers, but we're talking about the skills set that it supports students developing, like creativity and imagination. How can, you know, engaging and embarking on an engineering problem set or challenge support creativity? How often are we supporting young people and being creative and imaginative in our classrooms and on our content and on our curriculum, right? It supports critical thinking skills, right? Analysis, interpretation, inference, evaluation. All of these skills are not just good for science, right? They support all content areas. They support understanding, knowledge, competency, how we navigate and make sense of the world around us. Exploratory learning, right? How we support and encourage young people to experiment and be fearless in experimenting. I've been in schools where they're like, you know what, take a risk. Do whatever you want to do, we're here to support you. I've been in schools like, you can't take risks here. You have to get it right or you're wrong, right? So it's important for us to recognize, you know, how supporting young people in developing STEM identities and teaching through a STEM framework really supports these skills that can advance students and support students' skill set regardless if they want to pursue a career in STEM or not, right? So to me, it's really about access to STEM for all, right? So when we talk about the challenge in the STEM pipeline, right, in a global context, right, the United States is severely behind other similarly developed nations when it comes to STEM education. In 2018, the US ranked 38 in math and 24th in science. In 2019, women comprise of only 27% of the STEM workforce, all right? There are major, I'm sure we all know that there are major and huge disparities when it comes to STEM and women. Women only make up 18% of computer science undergrads, and less than half of schools in the United States offer computer science classes, right? Only 30% of high school graduates are prepared to pursue college-level science courses, right? So similar to your experience, right? We're talking about just having that access and opportunity to be prepared to be successful in your entry-level science courses in undergrad, all right? So I'm gonna kind of go through this from different perspectives. So the state of STEM for communities of color in K-12 education, right? The research demonstrates that students from a high socioeconomic background, they tend to declare science majors because of their access to more rigorous coursework in their high schools and possible suburban communities compared to those, compared to other students, compared to students who come from urban contexts, oftentimes Black and brown students. And there are disparities and achievement gaps when it comes to like testing between Black students and white students, and Latino students and white students as well, right? So in the 4th grade, Black students compared to white students is a 14% achievement gap, and we notice that gap continue to grow when they take their tests and exams in the 8th grade to 17%. Similar to Latino students, 12.5% in the 4th grade compared to close to 14% in the 8th grade, right? So we're noticing this widening achievement gap when we compare Black and brown youth to white youth, demonstrating that, you know, white youth are more prepared to advance and access STEM courses compared to their white counterparts. Sorry about this. Yeah, it's a thing. I'm using my phone as a remote. It's just, it's okay. Yeah, no, I think it disconnects. I think it disconnects every time I That's what happens, right? Yeah. Maybe I can. I'm sorry, Paul. Give me a second. Yeah. Yeah. apologies, everybody. So, we'll talk about disparities in K-12 education, right? Similarly, K-12 education, access, we talk about access to quality and relevant STEM education is a major factor. 90% of districts that primarily serve Black and Latino students have difficulty in recruiting certified and qualified teachers in general across the board, but particularly science and math teachers. I work in schools in New York City, and I'm always getting calls and emails around like, do I know any qualified and good science teachers, right? It's always a hard find. I know that firsthand. Students of color also may have a false perception that if they can't excel in STEM courses in high school or middle school, that they won't be eligible to access or engage in STEM careers. 25% of high schools, the highest percentage of Black and Latino students don't offer Algebra 2, right? So access to coursework and courses that prepare and support students in advancing in higher education. 33% of those schools do not offer chemistry. And there's a weed-out culture in higher education in particular that indirectly targets students of culture. So like the anecdotes that you shared earlier, the research supports all of those anecdotes, unfortunately, right? So we look at higher education, right? Black graduates, only 9% of Black graduates between 2001 and 2016 were awarded science degrees. In engineering, that number declined from 5% to 4% over that 15-year time period. In math, that percentage dropped from 7% to 4% over that 15-year time period, right? And this is all during a time when, this is, towards the early to mid 2000s when Obama was in office and really having a lot of initiatives to support students of color and communities of color in STEM, right? But we're still noticing this decline. 40% of Black students switch out of STEM majors before earning a degree. When we look at the STEM workforce, there's a lack of racial diversity in STEM fields, right? So even folks who persist, they get through high school, they graduate with a STEM degree in college, they go out into the STEM workforce. There's still challenges for people of color, right? For Black people in particular. Blacks in STEM are 4 times more likely as whites to say that their workplace does not pay enough attention to increase racial and ethnic diversity. About half of STEM workers believe that there's limited quality education, and that's a major reason why Black and Hispanics are underrepresented in STEM jobs. And 62% of Blacks in STEM jobs have experienced race-based discrimination at work, right? So this idea of persisting, people of color can persist as much as we want, but in all these aspects of this pipeline, there are challenges that folks have to persist, navigate, and make sense of, right? And this is very important. I know it's small, we can't see it, but I want to highlight this. This is from the Pew Research Center, and it talks about the racial and ethnic gaps among STEM employees. So I want to highlight here a couple of items on this survey. So this survey is showing among those in STEM jobs who are Black is in the dark blue. So and in the green or lighter green are white counterparts. So 73% of Blacks are less likely to have access to quality education to prepare them for STEM fields. 72% of Blacks face discrimination in recruitment and hiring processes. 67% of Blacks are not encouraged to pursue STEM subjects at an early age. There's 42% of Blacks demonstrate that the lack of Black and Hispanic role models in the field. And what I want to highlight the most here is that we notice the disparities here, right? But in this last item, right, only 14%, this is the least number compared to the other counterparts, are just less interested in STEM. So this demonstrates that Black folks, right, and individuals are very interested in STEM more than their counterparts. But because of systemic issues and barriers, they have limited access and opportunities to navigate and access the field, unfortunately. All right. So just want to highlight that there are challenges across the STEM pipeline, right? There are K-12 in K-12 educational settings, higher ed education settings, and also the STEM workforce, right? There are challenges in all these different pipelines, and I know that we all access and we're all navigating these different spaces. And my charge for all of us is to understand how can we find some plausible solutions within our own context, right? You know, any individual is not going to be able to, you know, put a huge dent in the challenges that we see in this overall pipeline. But what can we do in our own individual context to support young people? So as a K-12 educator and a teacher educator, right, thinking about how K-12 education can and must, in my opinion, respond to STEM disparities, is we have to think about how we're providing high quality STEM instruction and curriculum for our students. That means how do we support teachers in training and professional development after they get to the job, after they get to our schools? Because as a teacher educator, I know that there's definitely a lack of preparation when it comes for teachers in higher education. I see that firsthand. How can we support teachers in employing classroom practices that support equity, right? So not just, you know, supporting students in rote memorization, but having experiential-based and interdisciplinary opportunities and experiences in schools, right? How can we support our young people in seeing STEM come alive? What's the application of these concepts, of these ideas, of this content, that it doesn't only exist static within a textbook, right? Very important, how do we connect students' cultural experiences in their native languages to the content, right? So what about your culture? How can we be culturally relevant in our instruction to show students that, hey, we can use STEM, right, and science concepts and ideas to solve problems, right? That might be relevant to you, that you might experience in your home, in your community, right? Connect to real world problems, social justice aspects. I consult at a school that has a social justice based curriculum, and every project that students, project-based school, and every project that students embark on and engage in, they have to be solving a problem that is in the Bronx, right? So they have to solve a problem that's in their local community or their global community, right? But showing students that there's a connection, there's an application for these concepts and ideas that we're learning in class. Organizing schools to foster equity, right? If we have advanced classes, if we have chemistry and algebra 2 offered in these schools, we're not weeding out students and only selecting certain students to take them. How can we provide opportunities for all students to be successful and have opportunities to engage and embark in those classes? Interdisciplinary learning, you know, how can we draw connections between STEM and other contents? Social studies, literacy, English. And how can we seek innovative solutions that empower students to develop STEM identity? I think that the STEM identity piece is very important for our young people, because if they don't identify as scientists, if they don't think that they can be scientists, engineers or mathematicians or work in technology, then that just kind of cuts them off right there. They're not going to want to kind of embark or even want to major in a STEM major or discipline when they get to higher education. So I want to talk to you a little bit about my work and the work that I do around STEM education and how I leverage youth culture. So I talked a little bit about my experiences as a child and how I was engaged in STEM. And I know that, you know, my experience, not everybody's experience, my experience is unique to me. But I've conducted a lot of research around leveraging hip hop as a tool to support the achievement and success of students. Oh no, okay, that's fine. I have a video I'm going to show you, but I have to make sure that the audio is connected. Right? So this is one of my favorite hip hop images. This is a hip hop gathering in the Bronx, circa 1978. And I don't know if you can all see this image, but I wanted to ask you all, what are some key noticings in this image? And if any, how does this image relate to STEM education?
Well, they're in the park and they need access to electricity. They got a whole bunch of components that they need to have power. So somehow they're getting power, maybe through one of the light poles or something like that, which
Absolutely.
means that they have to know how to grab power wherever it is.
I would also say resourcefulness and experimentation and just general figuring out.
Yeah, this all makes something out of nothing, right? Collaboration, right? Resilience. These folks want to host a gathering in the park, it seems like, and that's their goal and that's their objective. So they're going to try to figure out. They're going to just figure it out, right? They were rigging the electricity from a light post, and there was no manual on how to do that, right? Back in the 70s. So somebody figured it out, and then now it's passed down to the community and passed on to other communities, right? So there's a resilience and ingenuity when it comes to hip hop and hip hop culture and resilience, right? I don't know what these folks' experiences were in schools, and if they were in school, their teachers can encourage them to do something similar to this. But we know that young people can be resilient when they want to be, right? We know that they're brilliant, and if they have the right charge, they can manifest whatever they want to manifest. I truly believe that about all young people. And it's really important for us to, as educators, as school leaders, etc., to create the context for our young people to do so, right? So I'm going to talk to you about two things, maybe one thing. Two things that I do, or that I've done as an educator, and that I research that supports STEM competencies and also the development of science identity amongst students of color. All right. So the first thing is a framework that this was my dissertation study, and I support my students right now in leveraging hip hop pedagogy to support the development of students, science content acquisition, and also science identity. So hip hop pedagogy in a very simple way is leveraging the creative elements of hip hop. So hip hop is a culture. My computer is not cooperating with me today. Okay, well, hip hop is a culture, right? It's a culture. It's not solely a genre of music, and it's a culture that's existed since the 1970s. The originators of hip hop have never thought that hip hop would be this huge billion-dollar industry, right? When we talk about hip hop, it's important to acknowledge that there's commercialized hip hop, right? There's hip hop that's corporations and businesses run and own for profit-based experiences. And there's also like the culture of hip hop that Black people continue to navigate, innovate, and create, right? So hip hop has 5 creative elements. We have the MC, the B-boy, the graffiti artist, the DJ, and now the sub. So for this approach to teaching, what I do is I support teachers and leverage and drawing different teaching strategies that align to the different elements of hip hop. So what that looks like, let me share some examples. What that can look like, and it's not just like kids, what it can look like is, for the B-boy, for example, B-boys and B-girls, they're dancers, right? They're competitive dancers. They will compete with each other at parties, with their dance moves on the floor, etc. So thinking about how can we engage in kinesthetic learning opportunities for young people, but not just like, when you go to a classroom, we have like table activities where you just move from one table to another, right? And teachers like, yeah, my kids are moving around, which is great. But how can we support young people in movement in the classroom and connect that movement to their understanding and conceptualization of the concept? So an example of what this looked like in my science classroom is, I remember when I was teaching the different states of matter, and we have solid, liquid, gas. And students said, like, I understand the concept, right? But they understood when they drew out the molecule in the notebook, but it was really difficult for them to kind of garner and capture the concept of how the molecules would expand and contract and be closer together or further apart as temperature increased or decreased in the container. So I shared to my students, okay, you are all molecules, right? So each student in the classroom, you're all molecules. And they're like, okay, cool, we're all molecules. So I'm like, well, the classrooms are container. So I asked students, how do solid molecules interact? And they shared, well, solid molecules, they have a rigid shape and structure, and they take the form of the container. So I'm like, okay, you are all solid molecules, and the temperature is freezing in the classroom. So how would the solid molecules interact? And all the students got up off their chairs, went to one side of the room, and stood in the structure of solid molecules, right? Once they did that, I'm like, okay, so we're good. We're not perfect. We're close. Are molecules ever, stationary? Are they ever still? And they're like, no. Molecules are always moving. They're always vibrating, even if they have little to no energy. So the students start like shaking and vibrating in their while they were standing up. So it's like, okay, we're in the container. We're increasing the temperature of the container, right? So we're increasing the temperature of the container. Our solid is now turning into a liquid. So what's happening to the molecules in the container? Now students start rolling themselves along the wall of the class because that's the container. Liquid takes the shape of the container. Pardon, solid does not take the shape of the container. Liquid takes the shape of the container and students recognize that. Then I said, okay, now we're continuing to increase the temperature of the container, and the molecules are now gas particles, right? And the students are like, okay, gas particles, they know how gas particles interact. They move around very quickly, they bump into each other, so the students started running around the class playfully, bumping into each other. When I engaged in this activity, not every student participated, because not every student had a deep understanding of how the particles would interact. But after me talking to students and conducting a study, I was able to realize that even the students who didn't participate in the activity, they were able to gain a deeper understanding by watching their peers interact in the activity. So that's an example of viewpoint. Like, how can we incorporate kinesthetic learning to support our understanding of concepts? Graffiti artists are visual artists. They scale buildings, they draw murals on billboards, etc. So how can we incorporate more visual arts to support understanding and conceptualization of science content, right? Essentially is, how can we take the creative elements of hip hop and take these science concepts and make them less abstract and more practical, right? And how can we support young people in developing a better and deeper understanding of that? So that's my framework for hip hop pedagogy. It goes deeper than that. And aside from hip hop, it also supports students who have and learners multiple intelligences, right? Oftentimes when teachers are teaching in the classroom, they're teaching towards one or two different multiple intelligences. Hip hop pedagogy caters to all multiple intelligences. So it supports students in that way, right? I do want to talk to us about a program that I run, and I wonder if there's audio. Do you know if there's audio here? Oh, it's HDMI, so I'm sure. Yeah, I think I might have shot it. So I want to talk to you all about a program that I run that's called the Science Genius Program. And the Science Genius Program Science Genius Program. Maybe. The Science Genius Program is a program that leverages the concepts and ideas of hip hop to support young people in developing positive science identities. So essentially we go into schools and we support science, we work with science teachers and we say, okay, young people, we want you to write science raps or science songs or science spoken word poetry. And when we go into schools at first, students are really perplexed. Like, what are you talking about? We're doing hip hop in class, it makes no sense. We've been running this program in schools for the last 10 years. We've done it in New York City, we've done it in Toronto, we've done it in Texas, Florida, Jamaica, and when we conducted research studies on this. So students write science-themed rhymes based on the concepts that they're learning in the science class. And at the end of the program, each school identifies one science, like their best art student who has the best song or best rhyme, and they go off and they compete against students from other schools who are participating in the program as well. So not only is it an in-school kind of application, but it fosters community and allows students to compete against students from other schools who have the best science-based rhymes. And the winners of each school, they advance to the final battles where they compete against other schools, right? And this program has been really impactful to young people because they're able to demonstrate their understanding and their brilliance when it comes to science content through hip hop.
Oh my God.
I think so. All right, so let's see. to. So ultimately, students, they engage in these science, in these competitions, and all the finalists, they get to make songs and music videos, they get to perform in front of their community members. So what happens is students get to identify a scientist, they get to present their knowledge and their understanding of science concepts in front of their community members, which makes them feel like celebrities, quote unquote, all through science, right? So our research has demonstrated that students have felt empowered when engaging in this type of activity. Outcomes of our program. I'm sorry, I wish the video worked. I'm actually trying to download it right now so we can try to watch it in a little bit. But these are some outcomes of the Science Genius program. Students have a deeper understanding of science content. It's increased engagement in science. These are things that we've noticed that we weren't intentional about, that the students engaging in this program provides them a therapeutic out space for them to kind of make sense of their challenges around mental health, emotional challenges, etc. What we noticed is that students were connecting, because hip hop is where artists are sharing their lived experiences, right? They're sharing things that they're navigating as individuals within the community, and our students were doing the same, only drawing their lived experiences and what they were going through as individuals and drawing connections to science content. So that demonstrated a deeper understanding of the content and the concepts that they were learning and that they were engaging in, right? They were allowed to bring their emotional selves into the classroom. And from the program, we noticed increased attendance, increased cultural capital as it relates to science, right? So students engaging in the Science Genius program and teachers leveraging hip hop as an approach to teaching and a means to teaching have supported students, particularly Black and brown students in urban spaces, in developing and increasing their cultural capital, right? When talking about cultural capital, the idea that students have more opportunity and access and confidence within themselves to navigate science spaces, right? So, for example, if students participate in the Science Genius program, that's not to say that they're going to go off and become engineers, but they'll be more prepared and more confident in navigating those spaces, right? So if they had an opportunity to self-select and self-register themselves for a science class, our research showed that students who participate in our program were more likely to do so, right? Because they had a confidence, they had positive experience in science, and that's what supported them and propelled them to go off and try to make advancements in STEM as they navigated higher education. And then, last thing is that back to the importance for STEM for all, is that when we think about the skills that engaging young people in STEM offers and supports, it supports social change, right? If we want to change the world, if we want to support institutions and systems and becoming more equitable, right, we have to really support and teach students to develop these skills: creativity, imagination, creative thinking, exploratory learning, problem solving, and have a passion for innovation. It's really one of the best paths forward for us. So there are a lot of challenges within our STEM pipeline in the way that we engage our students in K-12, higher ed, but also the workforce. Will show us what the future of STEM, particularly for students of color, can look like. That's all I have for us today. I apologize for the technical difficulties, but I know time is limited, but I just wanted to know, what are some thoughts? Are there any questions? How are we feeling? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for this. One thing that's coming up for me, it's a question, but maybe we won't have time to unpack it, but I guess what your presentation is sparking me to think about is when we think about the pipeline that you showed earlier, and even how STEM profession is conceptualized, are we including STEM educators as STEM professionals? And one of the things I'm wondering is like, you know, that old saying of like, if you can't do, teach.
Yeah.
I find that it seems to be the strongest when it comes to the sciences. And I had an experience recently where I was talking to a black man who had a math PhD, went to the highest levels, and you know, I was an educator. We were talking, and he was like, "Yeah, I definitely think that's true. If you're a scientist, then you would be practicing. You wouldn't go to the classroom."
Right.
But some of the stats you showed about how the teacher shortage is most drastic with math and science teachers. So I guess I would be wondering more about your work as a STEM educator, working with people who want to be STEM teachers, and one, how they see themselves in terms of like their STEM identity, and two, like even the work that you're doing with young people through the Science Genius, like is one of the pathways that they might be encouraged around, like being in schools. And what does that mean to be a scientist in a school? So that's my.
So a lot of our students, not a lot, but a handful of students who have graduated who we engage in the Science Genius program are teachers, or work in community spaces. And we believe we're actually trying to capture some studies right now, conduct some studies right now about their shifts and their decisions around these career opportunities, but it's because they have positive experiences in school as a result of the program. And you know, I always tell people that, you know, our goal around the Science Genius program is not, the intention is not necessarily to it's not necessarily for students to go out and have STEM careers, but we want students to have the competence and the confidence to be able to at least access and embark on that if they chose. If that was their decision, right? And I agree with you. I think there is a lot of work to do around STEM education in particular, but in STEM education, there's also the discipline of STEM that are similar and also very different. So the students that I teach right now at Seton Hall, the science students, you know, they've come from high school science backgrounds, and that's what makes them want to become science educators or STEM educators. And a lot of the work for me is to really break their understanding and the Western views of science. And that's where we really see the challenges. And the Western views of science and the way that the science discipline is what really, you know, creates these barriers for black students, right? Like the lead out classes. They're not smart enough to engage. If you're not good here, you don't belong here, right? So I really work with my students to understand that, you know, those constructs shouldn't exist in the classrooms, and get them to understand about the challenges that we see in the field and within our communities, so that they want to go out and make change, right? Is it perfect? Not necessarily, but that's the type of work that I'm doing with my students right now at Seton Hall. And there's a lot more work to do. Any thoughts, questions, comments?
I'm just curious, your students that you teach at Seton Hall, are they in a teacher's program, or so they're teaching to become STEM instructors?
Yeah, so I teach in the education department, not in the sciences. And yeah, it's a teacher preparation program when they go out and become teachers in 4 years.
So with your hip hop, that is the beginning of this culturally responsive curriculum pedagogy. Right?
Yeah.
So you're really teaching about how you can take your environment and actually add the science on top of that, so that they have their first experience to be a welcoming experience. Self-efficacy begins that, and then hopefully the next experience will be equally positive,
right,
and they will stay at it and deal with the. Listen, but here's the other question I have for you. When you said even after they get out of STEM, so this is a minority group that was able to navigate the resistance, the ability of staying true to their objective. They get the degree, and then when they get the job, they feel hostile.
That's the research shares right now, right? It shows the challenge and all the barriers that exist in all of these spaces. You know, like I'm a K-12 educator and teacher educator, so I don't have much influence in the STEM workforce, at least right now, at least. You know, but it's important to for at least for me to demonstrate to everybody that there are challenges and barriers across the whole pipeline, and we really have to, like, whatever space that we're in, do our due diligence in trying to, like, limit those barriers to provide opportunities and access for people.
When you did your studies and review, did you do the comparison between the HBCUs versus the non-HBCUs? Because I believe that they are graduating probably the majority of the STEM black students with undergraduate degrees. Right?
Yeah, I don't have the data here, but I know for sure, like certain, like HBCUs are graduating most of black scientists and black STEM degree holders. Absolutely. Yes.
How does your science class professors react to your pedagogical approach?
Some are receptive because they recognize that it's supportive of students' development, understanding of content. Others are, they're situated in Eurocentric views of the world and science, and I can't do anything about that. But I get positive reviews in some spaces, and I get some people who just don't want to engage or interact. And I'm not saying this is the only way or approach to teach and engage young folks in science. It's what I do in my work and my research, and I find that it's been effective in the communities that I serve. So that's my work. Then you have a lot of folks who are traditionalists, and they care about the they see value, unfortunately, in weed out courses, and they have perceptions that if you're not deemed quote unquote smart enough, you don't belong here, or you shouldn't be here. And that's part of the challenge as well.
A lot of parents put too much. I know it might be educated in it, but a lot of parents put too much faith in the public school system. I know I did, and this gentleman over here, he was the president of local unit of NJIT, and they put more people out in STEM through what's the program called? AXO.
Okay.
They had presentations, they could do hip hop, they could do all this stuff that you presented, and it made it, some people say, oh, I could do that, or I could get involved in this. And then we have other people who are not so dependent on what the school can do for the kids, but after school programs.
Right.
Because I work with Community Development Corporation, and I work with elders and senior citizens, taught them when first got emails and going all the way back to, how to work the computer so they could communicate with their grandkids. So did that in the church basement. And also, Mr. Perry also knows that the school system that we worked in, they weren't training people to fly airplanes. But Reverend White said, I would teach these kids how to fly airplanes. So he formed a group, and now it must be at least a dozen or so more captains flying big planes. But that was done outside.
That's amazing.
Some community organization, but wasn't done according to the school curriculum. Because the school curriculum is designed, and I've worked in both places. It's designed to be unequal.
I agree with you on that.
It's designed to be unequal. Because you become a competitor.
Right.
And I've worked with brilliant black students and worked with other students that weren't that brilliant, but they had other things that could help them progress and go along and do better economically than the kids who had genius ideas.
Absolutely.
But they had no places to go. I grew up with groups of kids that raised pigeons and bred dogs.
Yeah.
But none of them went on to become veterinarians.
Right.
They had fixing broken limbs and wings and things like that. And even us, we made scooters out of boxes, old carriages, and downhill races and things like that. But none of us went on to become designers of automobiles, Teslas, and things like that.
And some of that is partially because of lack of access and to see what careers exist.
But coming back to my original thing, is we put our children in the hands of the public school system. Feed them breakfast, feed them lunch, see if their spine is correct, see if they need glasses, see if they got hearing problems, if they need psychiatric treatment, they need medication, and we do that, But most of the teachers that I work with, they made money in that district, but they moved to another district.
they didn't really
to put their kids in the
Yep.
school over there.
Absolutely.
And I'm saying,
the community is important.
I'm not buying anything from your bakery if you don't eat it.
Yeah,
If you don't send your kids here to come to school every day.
that's fair.
You over here, but you ride in here, but I can't eat at a restaurant that you don't eat at. You would, and if you had to bring your kids in here with you every day,
Exactly.
because when I worked in the white district, they told me, oh, we got reciprocity. Since you work here, you can bring your kid, your child here,
yeah.
and you come to school here.
Yeah.
I said, no, I'll stay, because I know Jake the Junkie, and I know Willie the Wino, and I know how to deal with them.
Yeah.
But I'm not bringing my son out here because he's 6'2" and you know, in the 10th grade. I'm not bringing him out here to be on the football team
Yeah.
and get with the rest of these people that's doing things that
Everybody's on that.
I never, you know, I don't want my son to get involved in that. But you know, we turn our kids over to a system that's don't even tell them who they are.
Right. Yeah.
Don't even tell them what they could do. Who say you are a crime in America? It's you. You know, I've gone to neighborhoods and went to the doorbell, and little kids come and they go running back through the house talking about black man, black man. You know, because the concept that they hear around the dining room table, and coming back to something else you said about STEM. When I was teaching for a corporation, and just like you doing here, I'm setting up for the day, and here come the people coming in, and every one of them pays $1,000 to be there that day, and I'm setting up, and they ask me when the teacher gonna show. I said, don't worry, he'll be here in a little.
I agree with you. The community support is important. So like this program, we created to work in schools, but in a lot of spaces, it serves as an out-of-school program.
So I just said all that. There's a lot of other variables,
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
that's surrounding what you're talking about, what you're trying to do. As the teacher, but then we can't clone you and put you in all these different places
Exactly.
where people are in the position and say, "Oh, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that."
I get that.
So it's a thing we have to deal with. Like I say, I just keep working with my community development corporation.
That's it.
Doing what I can do.
Do the change,
Church
create
basement.
the change that you can change, that you can create.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.